My dear friends, this last week, because the bishop had actually phoned to ask me to go there, I went to a monastery of perpetual adoration in Holland, and there it was a quiet time where there was nothing but Jesus. And because these were brides of Christ, I really felt something of what it was to be at a wedding feast. They listen, and every syllable falls on wide open ears and hearts. Their life is Jesus, and they console him greatly. They console him also by the application of all that they have on the physical level, as did the woman in the Gospel who poured precious ointment on the feet of the Lord. He accepts that feminine delicacy, and women do it well. Nothing is spared. The cleanliness at the altar, the preparation of the flowers, always altar linen, virgin clean, and then the liturgy itself, nothing spared. The maximum of human beauty for God is served with the best that we have. Now, in that context, I'd like to share a few thoughts which were coming to me over these last days of Eucharistic listening and adoration. It's the fact that that is not always the case. Indeed, it just happens that this day, the 16th of October, would be, if it were a normal day, also the memorial of a great Eucharistic saint, the Saint of the Sacred Heart, St. Margaret Mary Alacoque. And do you remember how the Sacred Heart had essentially two parallel messages coming in, all in one? One was the invitation to come close, because that was not happening. You may know that in certain countries, Jansenism was leaving a cold heart and a fear on the hearts of men. They would not approach the Lord. And when therefore asking for a monthly communion, he was asking for a lot. But then the other, this fact that he is badly treated, hence the thorns, which we find again also at Fatima. Now, these thorns are explained by the Lord himself. He shows the heart. Behold the heart, which has so loved men and which is so badly treated. He talks about indifference, about sacrilege, about coldness. And that, I'm afraid, my brethren, is what he is finding a lot in our day. So in this little assembly, where we are all making a sacrifice to come from a distance, it is as well to do the maximum that we have and make up for what is not necessarily happening everywhere else. There are brilliant exceptions, thank God. But in Ireland, unfortunately, the norm is, as you know, the quickie, the quick fix. And I have noticed over the last years that the norm is becoming ever shorter. People talk now normally about half an hour for the duration of the Sunday Mass. Now compare that with the many hours they're spending before a screen, and a plethora of screens, and the input they're getting from there, and what use is that going to be with regard to counterbalancing the messages coming from elsewhere? What catechetical knowledge can happen in 5 minutes of a homily? Very little. And the proof is that the consequences follow. Massively, and I think you're aware of it, people are coming up to communion very casually, with grave sin unconfessed, and not even intending to confess it, because confession in practice is going out of the window progressively. So it's all matter for awareness. But I want to go also into one or two specific areas. It's the fact that we have deprived ourselves also by depriving our King of his honour. When I was growing up in school days, I was already serving there in our big parish in Cardiff. It was a massive parish, 6 or 7 priests, an army of altar boys, and even though it was after the council, the trimmings were still there. For instance, at the preface, 6 small altar boys would come in with candles and so on. It was all as before, but just facing the people, and still in Latin, and going progressively a bit more into English, but always the same ceremony and fully sung, because they were Benedictines. Now, what I'm getting at is this. Even a child feels this is other. This is divine. It lasted an hour. There was majesty in the air. We were formed well, and people did not talk in church. Now, this is after the council, because things didn't change straight away. What we have landed at now is very, very different. There are very few churches in Ireland where the common parts are really sung. In practice, you get a folk choir quite often, or if you're lucky, a proper choir who will sing bits here and there, but all the Mass itself is said, and usually fairly quickly. So the rhythm is not contemplative. It's hurried. And therefore there's no time to relax in God. Now, more than that, the actual quality of celebration is what it is. If you notice in Ireland, the speed at which the responses are said is something else. Why the hurry? Those beautiful prayers, for instance, when one asks the Lord accept the sacrifice, they're whizzed through at a terrible speed. Even the normal greetings, they're just hurried through. There's no time to think about what we're saying. It's all a jarring note in the house of God. It's so different from what you find in a place where God is all, and nothing is spared, and time doesn't enter into the equation. But there is more. There is now coming in an increase of things like putting on a machine, a CD, and that is creating inauthentic liturgy. There is also the fact that in Ireland quite often no one will sing because the choirs have always done it. So we're in a bad place, my friends, in this Emerald Isle, liturgically. We're in an awful state compared with some countries and some places. And it's our own fault. No one seems to be able to do anything about it because it's a massive bulldozer of resistance, the force of habit, which now reigns supreme. There are exceptions. One actually would be within prayer groups where there is a genuine desire to pray well and calmly. And actually one finds there quite often the capacity to create an atmosphere, create beauty by a gentle music ministry. And that is what we need. We need to be able to create something which suggests with our own means the beyond. I want to zoom into one area. It's the fact that actually this is not just human. It's actually having a knock-on effect as well, because people are not having an experience of the divine. There was a suicide some years ago in France. A young man left a letter behind him, and it got to the attention of a bishop. And the bishop took the letter with him to the bishop's assembly at Lourdes. And he read out this testimony of a young man who had just committed suicide. It went like this. He talked to different categories of men. And then he got, Et à vous les chrétiens, je dis. And to you Christians I say, j'ai été fasciné par la beauté de vos évangiles. I was fascinated by the beauty of your Gospels. Mais effrayé, but frightened, horrifié by the ugliness of your assemblies. And in the bishop's assembly there was heard to be a stir. Now France is actually streets ahead of us with regard to quality of celebration. You will not find a Sunday celebration, including Saturday evening, that goes on for less than an hour. And it will also be fully sung, always with a cantor or cantors. They have tried not to give God the minimum, but the maximum. Where am I landing, my friends? Where do we go for an experience of the beyond? It's not easy to answer. There are churches in Ireland where a genuine effort is made. One can travel, but one can also, if one wants to, be aware of it and oneself make up. Do adoration. That is in your power. It consoles your King. And in the house of God, let God reign. Do not talk in his presence. And moreover, keep things fairly simple when it comes to your prayer. Because one problem in this liturgy is this. I mean in liturgy in general. If we're not careful, one can be drained towards the outside. Liturgy to work has to carry us, has to happen in such a way that we don't think about it. If we're concentrating on the rite, the music, then we are actually not meeting him. We're doing this and it's not happening as it should. So there's a balance. But also to be aware that unfortunately other things have come in as well. People use the liturgy to draw attention to themselves. People like to be seen. People like to have a role. People feel flattered. Now that's not healthy. In the liturgy, man does not exist. He mingles with the angels, and as the angels do day and night, we too create an atmosphere in which we disappear, in which Jesus alone is seen. I conclude, my friends. If you want to see unchanged liturgy, you can, in some places yet. It's either to go to a very splendid liturgy, for instance, in an oratory, like the Brompton Oratory, or to go to even a Byzantine rite, where things have unchanged, gone on since the beginning of time, as it were, or to go to some celebrations here and there in Ireland, where genuine care is given. But don't settle for the minimum when you have a right to the rights of God. Don't be shy. God is shortchanged, and so